Aye, kuwe kuwa madue.
Aye, kuwe madue.
Aye, kuwe kuwa madue.
Aye, kuwe madue.
And you started to talk about this earlier. What's some of the work that you're doing when you moved out and you said you had, a nice resume, 5 internships under your belt, and what field did you end up falling into?
Yeah, so I started working for an investment bank doing equity research. It's the kind of work where you research stocks and you publish buy, sell, hold opinions on those based on different kind of quantitative and qualitative analysis. It was not the right industry for me. I stayed there for 5 years, and I learned a lot, and it was really good to learn about research and financial analysis and the tech industry. I was covering software companies, but ultimately it was not the right fit for me from a cultural perspective whatsoever. I never felt like I fit in, or I never felt like I would have equal opportunity in that world. So I left and I went to business school. I went to business school at Berkeley. I focused on strategy and marketing to just kind of take the quantitative skills I had and research skills and round that out in more of a strategic sense. And so, yeah, I went and worked at a tech company, Autodesk, for 8 years, and I was like an internal consultant there. And I also, learned a ton about how to do strategy and operations, and how analysis can help bridge those worlds to help make better decisions. And ultimately, I kind of aged out of that role as well. I definitely felt like I hit a glass ceiling where I wasn't gonna go too much farther in that role after being there for 8 years, and so I set out on my own. So I took my experience and I started consulting independently, and I also started teaching at the business school at UC Berkeley, teaching a data visualization course, and I've been doing that for about 6-7 years. I probably won't be teaching anymore, but I'm still consulting independently, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting into more purpose-driven work, though. I'm in a period of transition right now, and I'm just looking to kind of bridge the two worlds. I've always known that I wanted to get into purpose-driven work. I saw my mom, as a social worker growing up, and aside from being in such a giving type of field, she was also always doing some kind of community-oriented projects, and so I believe that's in me, and so I've always been, doing some kind of community type of work as well on the side, but I really want to do that for my life's work from here on out, and so I'm trying to get there.
I hear that. So you mentioned earlier you were influenced by musicians, particularly Sam Cooke, and that it seems like that's something that you carried into your professional life and adult life. You doing music, and how did you get involved with that?
Oh man, I've been doing television since I was like 8 or 9 years old. I started off doing what they call atmosphere work and stuff like that, and then got calls to do different commercials and stuff like that. So I've been in and around the camera, for a long time. Okay. And I watched from an early age who the producers were. They were all non-melanated people for the most part. Who was behind the camera. They were non-melanated people. And I was peeping all of this at like 9 years old, 10 years old. I remember doing a show, it was the old series with Clarence Williams III, Mod Squad. Okay. And I was on that one that Sammy Davis was on. So that was my first time meeting Sammy Davis Jr. And he was doing all of these tricks and stuff like that with the guns. Mm-hmm. You like kids and like to be around kids. So I was one of a group of kids that did that show with him. But we've been in and around music, the radio, for a while, and always sort of imagining. Didn't know much about the music business at all. Funny story. Much later, this is after, we've been trying to get into the music business, trying to beating our head up against the wall. I had moved from Chicago at the time, and I had done music when I was in Chicago, right, with a group of good guys. But I was back in LA, me and my kids, and I was having this conversation with my cousin, Beanie. And my cousin used to train, he was a trackster, so he trained athletes, and he also did a lot of training for NFL athletes and stuff like that. And Beanie always had stories, and he always wanted us to run track, and I would only run track to play football or to play basketball, so I didn't like running. But Beanie had this story, and I was talking to him about music and stuff like that, and he said, well, you need to call your cousin. I said, what you talking about? Your cousin, Eddie, man. I said, what you talking about, man? Eddie Kendricks. Boy, you know that's your cousin? I said, no. Ask your mama. I looked at him with disbelief. I was like, man, you gotta be kidding me. I said, my dear, that's what we call my mother. Beanie said, Eddie Kendricks is our cousin. And he said, you can call him right now. Call his mama. And my mama said, oh yeah. I still didn't believe it. So I got the number, called the number, real nice lady on the other end of the phone. I said, hi, Miss Kendricks, how you doing? This is Tony, I'm Dottie D's son. Oh, how you doing, sugar? I said, well, I was just calling, still not believing, right? I'm wondering is Eddie home? Right? Like, is your refrigerator running, right? And she said, oh, no, sugar, Eddie's not home now. He's out of town now, but I'll tell him that you called when he gets back. I said, okay, well, thank you. Click. Hung up the phone in utter disbelief that all these years that we had been trying to, without knowing, anybody in the music industry, break into the industry, that my cousin was Eddie Kendricks.
Wow.
And my mama forgot to tell me. That's rich. So we, when I got back from Chicago, I got into some acting, and we eventually connected with a brother who was interested in producing, executive producing music. I had been writing, so I was interested in being produced. And we threw together a group called D-Rock and the Bayou Crew, really centered around my youngest brother, who was interested in being a rapper, and some other musicians I know. One brother I met doing a commercial, Don, Full of Love. And Don he was the voice of Michael Jackson in the early Jackson 5 cartoons, and he did a lot of stuff. He did, what's that, Back to the Future, played Goldie Wilson, the mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, and so me, Don, Mad Low Shrimp, Lolita, who was a multifaceted musician, we got together and, wrote and produced some stuff. And so wrote about 9 of 11 cuts for the album, and went from there. I remember one night waiting to get into a studio, and we were like a little angry, a little upset, because these cats were going over their time. And this was Wayne Henderson's studio out in Hollywood. Wayne Henderson used to be one of the Crusaders, jazz Crusaders, Wilton Felder and Joe Sample and all those cats. And so when we saw who was coming out of the studio, we were like, oh, okay. And it was Babyface and L.A. Reid,
Wow.
So they were doing something in there. I said, well, I guess we could wait for them, So we were cooled out on it, But, we did a nice album. It was a real cool album. It was a lot of message music that you could dance to. One of the early groups with full instrumentation, live band, and rap. And the album was called Let It Flow, Yeah, so one of the main tracks was My Mama Named Me Batman. And I remember writing that with me and my kids, doing the background. Yeah.
That's cool.
So it was a lot of fun.
That's cool. I do want to know, did you ever get a call back from Eddie? Did he, after he was out of town? And
I don't even remember.
Okay.
I don't, I don't even remember. I think I was so livid at the time that was actually a member of the Temptations.
Yeah.
Was related to me, and I never knew about it. But, you know, that's family sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. When did you start writing, or when did you decide that you wanted to get involved with music?
Oh, man, I've been writing for a long time. I started writing poetry early. I must have been about 7, 8 years old, something like that. Yeah, writing poetry. And I've always enjoyed writing poetry. And, you know, then that just kind of mixed with the music, just, you know, listening to I mean, we were fortunate to grow up at the time we grew up in, because we were tied to so many artists. You know, I remember having mashed potatoes contests with my cousin, you know, and we would go down Louisiana and you know, all the aunties and all that kind of stuff would be like, my cousin named Tyrone, and he was in LA also. We would have these mashed potatoes contests like James Brown, right? And we were going at it, funky chicken, the whole 9 yards. But I mean, to grow up, you know, listening to James Brown's music. Jackie Wilson was a little older for us, but you know, his music was still around. Sometimes performances on TV. You know, the Blue Magic, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, the Supremes. You know, all the old Motown people, old Atlantic people. You know. It was great to grow up around that music, and so I was influenced by all of that. Sound of Philadelphia, you know, the horns, you know, all of that stuff, Earth, Wind and Fire, you know. So we were around, you know, music in terms of what we were exposed to on the radio, where there was meaning to it, you know. Cats were putting down messages to it. Wasn't a lot of auto-tune. You know, so you had to sing, you know. Yeah. And if you couldn't sing, you know, they would tell you about it.
Yeah, I'm sure very early on they say what you know, you know, if you couldn't do it. That's interesting. So you got involved with that. You were writing, and then you also were doing acting. Was acting something that just kind of you felt like came naturally, or something that you were already kind of maybe doing in the house with your siblings, and like were you known for just kind of acting already a little bit, and then you just happened to start, you know, getting in front of a camera and doing that, or
there was an advertisement, and we used to watch a lot of TV when we could, and there was an advertisement called Children in Hollywood, and I would see that advertisement in the TV guide, and it always vibrated with me. You know, and so I asked my mom about it. I cut it out, you know, sent in the thing, and, you know, they got back to us. And it was more or less an agency for children, right? Okay. And so my mom, I mean, to her credit, was very, very supportive, you know, of that. And it takes a lot, even to drive you out to different readings, right? To read the sides, different auditions, and so on and so forth. Let alone when you get the gig, to make sure that you get there and all of that stuff. And so my mom set aside time to do that. And I had brothers that followed in my footsteps doing that. So I have a couple of brothers that were, you know, doing some film and some, you know, different series and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. So wow. That's how it started with us. Yeah. Interesting.
And did you attend school in Oakland?
Yeah,
Okay.
I went to school. I went to a few schools in Oakland. Martin Luther King. Went to Sequoia, Allendale. Most notably was Eli Omeday, of course. You know, all black private school in East Oakland, in deep East Oakland, which is like the heart of East Oakland. Is you know, that's where everything goes. It all goes down in East Oakland. Believe that. So, you know, that was a wonderful experience. You know,
I hear that.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask, what was just the whole education process like for you going to school? Because you were getting some type of education outside of that, as you mentioned, with your grandfather and the skills that he was instilling in you. So Did you feel like there was a big difference when you were going to school in terms of what you were learning and things like that?
Depends. Like if I was going to OUSD, Oakland Unified School District, there were definitely some differences. You know, Oakland Unified School District is a very challenged district. It's a very complex, you know, situation, especially as a student. You know, we often were, you know, placed with substitutes for the year, or, you know, we're underfunded, you know, textbooks, you know, from the early 80s, you know, and it's now close to 2000 and stuff like that. So, you know, it was a education that was kind of bipolar in between that world and, you know, going to an all-black private school, which of course gave it, you know, culture, identity, but then also gave us that rigor in academia as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm just going to shift gears here. I'm curious, what made you want to decide to become a doctor?
You know, my mother begged me to stay in school, and I ended up leaving school. You know, I ended up leaving school because I was always trying to find a better place for my family to live. And I was a teenage father, and I decided to stay and be a father. And things got expensive. So, you know, I'd moved from Santa Barbara. I attended UCSB, down to Oxnard to go to Oxnard Community College, always trying to finish school. Had gone through at least 3 different community colleges and completed the work and never received credit for the work because I've experienced being on probation, academic probation, you know, loans, student loans that were in default, all that stuff. It was all finance. So I was out of school for about 7.5 years. And when I left Chicago with my 3 children and the clothes on their backs, literally, and moved to Los Angeles. And after a while, you know, of working, you know, I worked just about any, my daughter always clowns me because there's always a job that she didn't know I had. I worked a bunch of jobs. And, you know, I finally took all my credits that I had. I had credits from Kennedy King College. I had, in Chicago, credits from Whittier College. And I brought those to Cal State Dominguez. And mind you, you know, when I was at Kennedy King College, I couldn't afford books. I mean, we could barely afford food, you know, and we had to make sure that food was on the table. And so I didn't have any books. You know, I did my reading in the library, and you know, I just did the best that I could on projects. I ended up acing every one of my classes doing that. So it was a commitment to be educated, to finish school. And then when I got to LA, I was working like 2.5 jobs. I realized that my kids were only going to be getting bigger, eating more. It's going to be more expensive, that I really needed to do something different. And I got all my credits together, put it on the table at Cal State Dominguez and said, what do I have to do to finish? I was still fluctuating between being pre-med and psychology, and I settled on psychology, and I was interested in getting my BA and getting out, finishing. But I made a commitment to myself and to my kids that I was going to go to school until they kicked me out. You know, I was going to go to school until I completed what I was there to complete, and that was the PhD. And so I finished there. I came up to the Bay Area to do my PhD and finish that. And I actually finished the master's and the PhD with my kids. You know, the bug that got me around psychology was this TV show, this news show that went out and they looked at Skid Row. And there was this conversation that was going on about what people really want and why people are impoverished, right? Why people are homeless. And they took this guy who was living in a box. And in short, they moved him out of his box. They got him a job at a bank. He had plants in front of his box, and he liked to water the plants. And so they got him a job taking care of plants at a bank.
Interesting.
Got him an apartment that was paid up for about 6 months, and moved him out of that situation, right? In a matter of, I think it was about 3 months, he was back living in the box.
Wow.
And they called it a matter of choice. That's what the line was in the news. And I knew that, at least I felt I knew, that it wasn't a matter of choice, that nobody chooses to be homeless and destitute. I had gone to school with cats who, you know, when I got back from Chicago, the crack epidemic had hit, and I would see some of these cats out on the streets of LA, you know, lost their minds. And I knew darn well that none of them thought about that. They all had dreams when they were coming up. So I didn't buy that. I had a hard time buying it. And then I ran into a cat named Seligman's theory, right? And Seligman his theory was learned helplessness at the time. And I said, man, this is intriguing. So I looked at his theory. At the time, I didn't know anything about black psychologists at all. And I said, well, this is an interesting explanation for why this guy would go back to his box. He had learned that he was helpless to change his condition. And how did they study that, right? So I caught the psychology bug from that point, and went all the way through. And I just knew that I wanted to be a person who had what it takes, who had the expertise to help his people, you know, because of the misdiagnosis of schizophrenia, right, and other things, right. So that was it for me.
I want to go back to something you said. You mentioned a few different places in Africa you traveled, as well as in Asia.
Yeah.
What got you traveling?
Music, performing.
Performing.
Yeah, performing, music. Also doing work inside of like nonprofit world. Kind of gave me that platform to be able to travel a little bit too. You know, even to this day, I'm still able to travel through, you know, nonprofit, through, you know, through the Brotherhood of Elders Network and, you know, other connections, you know, to the music realm, you know, but some tours, you know, 10 cities here. The first time I left the country, I did 52 shows.
Wow.
In Japan and Taiwan. That was amazing.
What type of music? Sorry,
West African.
West African.
West African theater and performance, you know. So I drummed, but I also did, you know, some dancing. I did a ceremonial mass dance and some other stuff like that. But yeah, I started out in the West African and ventured off into, you know, hip hop and stuff like that. So. Mm-hmm.
What got you interested in the music, and then you also said that you were drumming as well, and dancing and performing. How did that come about?
Well, you know, growing up in the community that we grow up here in Oakland, whether you're dealing with Wose, which was the church that was connected to Eli Omade, or you're dealing with Eli Omade, or you're dealing with any African Advanced Children's Learning Center, or these communities kind of tie you into the arts. And so it was standard and mandatory that we drum, that we sing, that we dance, that we do something that represented, you know, a cultural representation of who we are. So how I got into it is just by nature, you know, culture, you know, and being a part of the culture, you know, growing up. But later on in life, I would say that when I went to school in Mississippi, when I was like 18, and folks always ask, well, why'd you go down to Mississippi? I don't know why I went down to Mississippi. You know what I'm saying? I went down there because it was an opportunity for me to get away from Oakland. and it was going down in Oakland. It was like the Wild Wild West out here. You know what I mean? It was folks was dropping like flies. So I went down south to Mississippi, and I hooked up with a guy named Jerry down there, who was a drum maker, and who frequently went to New Orleans, because you know Louisiana and Mississippi are like right next to each other. So on the weekends, you know, outside of school, I would go to New Orleans with him, you know, and we'd be down there immersed in, New Orleans is like the most African city in the United States of America, you know, and you know that if you've been there, right? Yeah. And so there was a lot of African folks that were down there, and, you know, it just, as soon as I heard the drum, it just resonated with me, you know, and so I was able to kind of get back into the arts, you know, down in Mississippi. And then when I came back home to Oakland, I joined a West African troupe. And then that following week after I joined them, I was in Japan doing 52 shows. Wow. So in Taiwan. Yeah. Excellent,
excellent. And what was your first reaction or feeling when you left the country? The very first time, what was that like for you?
It was amazing. It was amazing. It was just, you know, there's a lot of myths. There's a lot of things that you tell yourself, you know, when you don't know. But what I found is that the greatest thing that you could ever do is go see for yourself. There's a lot of, you know, I'm a historian. There's a lot of books that I've read. There's a lot of things that I've, you know, immersed myself into, you know, but there's the only way that you'll ever really understand something fully is to go see it for yourself. I think Professor Manu Ampim, he talks about, you know, first-hand information, second-hand, third-hand, you know, and the difference in between them, you know. And so this is first-hand information, you know, and a lot of things you won't see in books. A lot of things they will not tell you, and you got to go to the locals. You got to go to the, you know, because the history is buried a little bit. You know, when I went to Taiwan, we met some folks that was darker than me. I was confused. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, how does that, what? Mm-hmm. When I got to Japan, I was met by a woman that was like 6'8". She was like, welcome to Japan. I was like, hello, okay. There goes that myth about short and like, so all the myths that I thought about, you know, they just went out the door. Wow. You know, and it's something very special about being in a place where you don't speak the language. You know, you have to hush up. You have to be silent. You have to pay attention. And everything you do is based off of energy. Your experiences, everything you do is based off of the type of person you are, what you attract to you. So everywhere I went around the world, I got treated good. You know what I mean? I had really good experiences. Even if folks in my group didn't. Like me personally, like I had really magical, wonderful experiences because I was open to the culture. I was very respectful of the people, you know, and came with the intent to understand, you know, and just be aware. So.
Excellent.
Oh, fun story. When I was in Taiwan, the first time I went, they took us to a mall. And so we went to a mall, and of course, folks is like trying to come up, take pictures with us, and you know, that whole thing, whatever, right? So we went to a hip hop store. And so when I walked into this hip hop store, you know, everybody's like, yo, what's up, man? You know, doing all that, you know, imitating who we are back here in the States. They were playing this guy named Keek the Sneak in the store. And now that's a local, that's a local Oakland artist, right? It's one of them artists I was mentioning earlier that folks might not know about, but Keek the Sneak. And they were playing a very popular song, you know, called Cool, you know. And so, you know, we just had like a East Oakland moment in the mall in Taiwan, you know, just on some random. So that was really, that let me know how vast culture can spread, you know, and how even though it took me 24 hours essentially to get to this place, that Oakland was still influencing this place like 24 hours away.
Yeah, that must be so affirming to just go out there and you hear someone, not only a, you know, a black artist, but someone specifically from your area, from your neighborhood, from, you know, to hear that all the way out there, you're like, how did this music even make its way, you know? Yeah. So it just, but as you said earlier, our voices and our culture travels far and wide. So, you know, that's a testament to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, when I applied to college, I got into college in my junior year. I mean, my junior year of high school. I played varsity basketball. My school closed down. We were very angry about that. It still is. It was unfair the way it was done. I went to a school called Mount Carmel, and it closed down in our junior year. I was one of 3 juniors who were playing varsity basketball. And so we were really looking to come back next year and rec shop, right? I was then forced to go to a school I didn't want to go to. It was a rival school. My mom wanted me to go to that school. It was another Catholic school. I was attacked at that school, and I fought back because I don't, take to that. And I had quite a reputation at that time. And so I was the only person expelled from the school after that altercation. In short, the faculty administration allowed the Letterman's Club to create a rule for our school that we couldn't wear our Letterman's jacket on their campus. And so I had stuff all over my jacket, track, football, basketball, all that kind of stuff. And on the principle of the thing, and I've been a principled person for a long time, I wasn't going to have it. So, I stepped onto the campus with my jacket on, and then it ensued from there. And so we were going at it. So, my mom wanted me to return to the school. I returned for probably about a week, 2 weeks. It was so crazy in the classroom, people throwing erasers at one of the chem teachers and all kind of stuff. I went back home and told her I'm not going there, I'm done. I'm going to Crenshaw High School. And that was sort of my independence from my mom's decision making from that point. I was just coming off also one of my best friends being murdered, being shot and killed, Big Mike. And that really split a lot of us up. So a lot of things were going on at that time. I was too late to even try out for Coach West's team at Crenshaw because they always had that together in the summer. So I got into college on my junior grades, and I got accepted at Stanford. I didn't know anything about Stanford. I only applied. I had no counseling in high school. Somebody said, I knew I wanted to be an electronic, at least I thought I wanted to be an electronic engineer because they made money. And, I got that from my brother. My older brother was doing some training in Los Angeles at, I think it was Trade Tech, out of high school. He was doing that, and he was fixing like Selectric typewriters, and he was working with one of the first balanced Caucasian people I knew, and that was a guy named Joe Dubers. And Joe was teaching him how to, it's what you do on YouTube now, the early presentations, right,
Gotcha. That
would turn into what is done online. But, of course, internet didn't exist at the time. So I got my notion of being in electronics from my older brother. So at that time, all I wanted to have is my afro, my Fu Manchu mustache, my dog, and my house. That was my goals. That's about as far as it went. And so I knew electronic engineering could get me there. Somebody said, hey, Stanford has a good program. I applied there. Somebody said a school called MIT had a good program. I applied there. I applied at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo only because a good friend of mine was a draftsman and he wanted to be an architect. He told me about the school, so we both applied. We drove up in his little car, found a party, partied, and the party was good, and we said, we going here. That was my decision-making process, going to college. I knew Stanford had a football team. That's all I knew. I knew MIT was in Massachusetts. That was too far, right? So I got into Cal Poly. My friend did not. I was so ignorant about college, I thought that once you accepted, you had to go. And so I went up there. I ended up redshirting that first year. fast forward years from there, probably about, 4 years from there, I'm sitting in an apartment in Oxnard with my wife at the time, my baby boy, and a baby on the way. And I'm watching this, we had a little TV, with the hanger in it, for the antenna. And I'm watching the basketball, on Saturday. And I was, going to college, I was working, so on and so forth, Oxnard College. And this cat was bringing the ball up court. And I was like, I know that dude. And I looked real closely. I said, I know that dude, but he looks somewhat different. And so the announcer said, Julius Wayne brings the ball up court for the Miners. And it was, I call him Julio, And Julius and I had played guard since 9th grade, at our school. Oh, wow. He was the other junior guard with me. And here he was playing at UTEP, University of Texas, El Paso. And, he looked a little bigger, had a full mustache, had his afro, and all of that. And as excited as I was to see that brother playing, because I knew his game. I mean, you play for years, you know somebody's game. I felt such deep hurt for myself at the time. So it was really an interesting feeling, right? Excited for that. And then, the kind of hurt that I felt at where I was at, right, at the time.
Would you say your spirituality was influenced by the travel you did overseas? Or was that already something that was a foundation that you had prior to leaving and getting a chance to experience these other cultures?
Well, I say, in regards to spirituality, I say it's inside my DNA. You know what I mean? I came back into this world, with my spirituality, you know what I mean? So it's my ancestors that really, implore me and give me strength and give me courage and wisdom and direction and things of that nature. And so I think, we're ancestral people, but for myself, I'm deeply involved with the ancestor work, and I know that the travel had a lot to do with evoking and, bringing that to the surface, you know what I mean? Like being able to see, what does it look like to live in certain principles and values. And you're watching people. I was in Mali, and Mali is the third poorest country in the world, but it felt like it was the richest country in the world. Because of the spirit of the people, because of the lessons, because of the culture, you know what I mean? It felt like I was walking into, when you see that opening scene with, in Wakanda and they in the market and stuff like that, that's how I felt. Like being in Mali, just a very, very beautiful place. And so that place itself just evoked a lot. It brought a lot, an understanding of who we are. You in Mansa Musa land. You know what I'm saying? You in the Bubakari II land, you do some research on these folks, you know what I'm saying, and figure out what's going on. But these are like high level civilizations, you know what I'm saying, that existed. So anytime you go into a space like that, it's going to influence you, and you don't have to read anything. You don't have to like go on a tour, pick up a pamphlet and nothing like that. You look in the eyes of the people. You see the way that they mold their gold and how they, the customs, how the kids, you look at the happiness in the kids, you look at the elders, how the elders are treated, nobody never, you look at, you don't see homelessness. You don't see certain things. So you just like, just a high level of culture definitely has an influence.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious, one of the things you brought up, that it really upset you when you saw, your friend playing, and it just kind of deeply hurt you of like, wow, this is, we're in these two different areas now, and
Right.
And how did you get over that hurt, or just even some of the trauma you mentioned earlier, when you lost your friend to gun violence?
Well, that was a rough one because there was no counseling. The cops actually harassed us after that, rather than, doing their job and going out and finding the cat that shot Mike. So that was a very difficult one to get over. I think it took years to accept, and I think it was painful for all our little group, our group of friends. Action is the best remedy for me. So my work in violence prevention has become very important for me. I've been to many more funerals since Mike's funeral, too many, more than I care to tally up when it comes to losing our young brothers, especially, as well as sisters. So it was very important for me to use whatever expertise I had or could bring to bear to work on the issue of violence, to work on the issue of how we treat each other, right? The whole police violence against our communities, that's a whole nother issue. And what we do to each other, you know, and for each other, that's something, it's tandem, but that's something else. And that's an area that I also choose to work with. Turning pain into purpose, I believe, is a process, the grief process. We're taught about a linear grief process. In our African thinking, grief is not linear. It's cyclical, it's circular. And we can revisit these incidents at different times in our lives, and we can sort of tap into our growth based on our emotional reactivity to it. So, you know, I think action, you know, being nose to grindstone has helped me, right, to just keep moving, right. In the last few years, you know, 10 or 15 years or so, I've learned, along with keeping it moving, the value of taking some time to be still and listen, you know, and just be, right? That didn't come easy to me. With all the literal knowledge, right? All the reading you do on everything from the I Ching to, you know, the Nguzu Saba to, you know, everything else about meditation, right? But it's very important. So that's helped me greatly to accept that these people I cared about are no longer physically with us, but have joined the ancestors, and that energy never dies.
Right. Mm-hmm. Wow. You seem to be doing work right now to impact other generations. Can you take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, once again, shout out to the Brotherhood of Elders Network for employing me with the responsibility of working with our young men. For the past 12 years, I've been doing intentional work with young black men. And I kind of grew up in a space where there were groups of black men who were working with young black boys. And so I got to see different models, from Dr. Wade Noble's Hawk Federation to the Simba movement. So I got to see different models of folks working with black youth. And so this is, you know, once again, a part of my life work. And I am the director of Ubuntu Leadership Institute. And this institute is really designed to empower these young brothers, to give them what they wouldn't get otherwise in school, you know, from a cultural standpoint, from an economic standpoint. When you talk about all the things that you wish to see shift and change, well, we have a platform to introduce those things to these young men. And then we give them an opportunity to practice that, and then tie it back into the network of other black men that's around to support them in their journey. So that's the work that I'm doing right now. And I think it's the work I'll be doing for a very long time. And it's the work I've been doing. You know, in about a month or so, I'll be speaking on a panel for all of the Cal State University systems. You know, they have a conference for young men of color. And I just really take pride in being able to have an influence, you know, and an impact, whether it's the Campaign for Black Male Achievement or whether it's through the OUSD, African American Male Achievement Program that I was in for a few years. You know, whatever it is, I'm happy to be able to have an impact on these young brothers and to give them something that we didn't have.
I hear that.